That drive home from a theater after watching a Final Destination movie in theaters is a horrifying experience. Overthinking every noise, every car that passes by, and God forbid you see a log truck. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and welcome back to another video. Today, I've got my review of Final Destination Bloodlines, the 6th Final Destination film that is now playing in theaters. Before I give you my honest thoughts, be sure to hit that like button, comment down below your thoughts on this movie if you've seen it, as well as your expectations if you've not yet watched it, and of course, subscribe and hit that notification bell to help reach my goal of 150,000 subscribers here on the channel. I mean, quite a bit. So when it comes to Final Destination, it's one of those horror franchises that I've seen every single movie in, and I quite enjoy it, despite the fact that like the highest rated movie for me is a 3.5 out of 5. As a whole, the franchise is solid entertainment with some bad to outright awful movies, but still, I enjoy the concept so much that I keep tuning in time and time again, and I've seen every movie except for this new one that I just watched more than one time. I actually did a whole rewatch, probably gonna have a ranking dropping soon, so be on the lookout for that. So this is the first movie in the series in quite some time, and I just wanted to see, you know, a fun Final Destination flick. Switches it up a bit, and, you know, I think we got that. I would say this is not the worst in the franchise, which is a good thing. It's also not the best, and I'll go ahead and dive into some pros and cons now. Starting with the positives, I'll say it. This movie's a bit less formulaic than some of the past entries. At a certain point in, like, any franchise, you're gonna get to a point where you feel like you're just watching the same movie over and over again. Look at something like Fast and Furious, look at something like Saw for a horror comparison. Here, it kind of felt like that for a while. This movie breaks from that somewhat. And what I mean by that is, it takes your common elements that are, you know, attributed to every Final Destination movie, and it kind of flips them on their head a little bit. Notably, the opening premonition. I won't elaborate as to what that is, because I personally didn't even watch the trailer before watching this movie. I saw like the first teaser of someone in like a tattoo parlor, and that was it. I didn't see any other footage, and so I want to also refrain from elaborating if you guys haven't seen the movie or don't want to know, but there is an opening premonition. Obviously, it's a Final Destination movie, but the way they go about it, the approach, and its role within the film is different than any other premonition we've seen, and I felt that was real exciting. There was a moment near the end of that premonition where it's kind of like, gotcha, probably didn't expect that, did you? And I was like, wow, they flipped things for the better here, and that initial launch point, you know, the premonition, that being switched up made the movie a little more exciting from the get-go. As with every Final Destination movie, there's a group of characters that are followed, and they end up dying one by one, getting picked off, right? Final Destination is essentially a slasher where death is the killer. Death is the Michael Myers or the ghost face of Final Destination. Well, in this movie, they actually take time to develop the characters before inevitably hits the fan, and so when the carnage begins, you feel a little bit more of a connection to these characters than you do in some past films. So there's some moments where you're like, man, that sucks. Like, I really didn't want that guy to die or that girl to bite the dust so early, but it happens, and I feel like that is something that signifies a quality horror film, especially in like the slasher genre where people are getting killed a bunch. You gotta feel something for the people that are getting killed. They're not just fodder, and that's the case with Bloodlines, in my opinion. They did a good job of setting up familial dynamics, because this film actually follows a family, which automatically something we haven't really done. Normally it's just a group of idiotic high schoolers or a work retreat, but this time around it's a family, and so the connection is there. There's a bigger bond that we see between these characters, so you feel something inside a little more when they go through these excruciating deaths. There's no other way to say it. And I do appreciate that this movie had less irritating younger characters. In past Final Destination movies, there have been some really frustrating, annoying portrayals of like teenagers, like your stereotypical high schooler, right? I feel like they did a good job of combating that in this movie, and there are some moments where you're like, oh, this could be cringe. I'm not sure about this character, but ultimately, I think they did a good job of not having like a singular character where you're like, oh, here we go again with this bum. But it's a Final Destination movie. You want to hear me talk about the kills, and trust me, you're gonna get them here in Bloodlines. I would say as well that this movie, the 6th, contains some of the most unique to date in the franchise. There were new kills, unseen types of kills in the franchise, and believe me, they're gory. I would say visually, this might be the most disturbing of the films, just because I feel like they introduced a little bit more of a practical element into some of the kills, but even then, it's still like the signature fake deaths where, you know, everything that happens is so absurd it's not supposed to look uber realistic. However, there are some moments where, you know, blood will splatter, and in the moment it'll look a bit CGI, but once the aftermath is on other characters, it's like, oh damn, that's pretty real. And so I appreciated the blending of, you know, some practical makeup work with the CG elements, because we can go back to the Final Destination, the fourth film, and see some absolutely atrocious 3D VFX work. That's absent here, but obviously it's kind of become a trait of the Final Destination series to have these over-the-top moments with kills, and so they stay true to that, the roots of the franchise, while also mixing in some horrific elements too. It goes without saying, if you're squeamish, don't watch this movie. I mean, you'll be looking away, wincing at certain moments. There's some gnarly kills. One in particular is the standout, and if you've seen the movie, you'll know what I'm referring to. It got me. It was like, oh, that's just so gross. It might be one of the nastiest of the entire franchise. And in classic Final Destination style, I think the movie has a pretty clever ending that I didn't fully see coming. I was always like, okay, what are they gonna do here? And you know, Final Destination movies like to have big moments, big epic reveals at the end, and I was like, okay, that's a pretty clever way to wrap this thing up. I like a sort of callback, and I was like, okay, I think they might have stuck the landing here. Now I have to mention before I get into some cons, Tony Todd is in this film, rest in peace. This is his last portrayal of his ongoing character, and he's back. He has one of his signature monologues that he typically has in Final Destination movies. It was really sweet here. There was a sentimental bit to it, and you know, it was a sweet moment in a movie that's for the most part pretty dark, filled with all these different kills. There was a bit of hope in his final lines, weirdly enough. However, there are cons to this Final Destination movie. None of the Final Destination movies are perfect in my mind, and like I mentioned, certain franchises, when they reach a certain number of movies, can't help but feel repetitive, and I feel like that's the case here. Specifically with major beats, because the initial setup for this film, I mean, it plays out like all the other movies. It's a premonition. You kind of know what you're getting into. They switched some things up for the better there, which was a pro, but major beats in this film of, you know, characters researching what has happened in the past with these premonitions. Oh my gosh, a character survives a disaster, and the group that they saved slowly gets picked off one by death, because that was what was meant to be. That was the order. How many times can we do that and it not feel stale? I don't know. This movie switches some things up, like I said, but still, there are major beats that can feel a bit repetitive, a bit stale, and I wish that this movie would have explored the grieving process and like familial trauma a bit more. I think they could have done something special diving into those themes more so than they did, because at the end of the day, I mean, I know these movies are about the kills, but I feel like they had a story at the heart where they could have really done something different than the other 6 Final Destination films, and had a pretty heavy-hitting emotional film that touched on those deeper themes, like I said. But again, these movies are all about the carnage, all about the kills. I get it. I just think they could have done more with it. But going back to the repetitive beat, I feel like they ran out of ideas in like the last 15 minutes of the movie. It's almost like they were trying to rip off one of the sequels with the way they went about wrapping things up. And I was like, we've seen this movie before. So I don't know what the intention was there, but it didn't feel as rewarding as I would have hoped as a viewer. Now, the final moments, you know, there's always like a Final Destination epilogue. I won't say too much, but that was the good stuff. The moments leading up to that was like, that's kind of a weak way to close out the third act. Also, I appreciate that this movie is, you know, reviving the Final Destination franchise in a way. It feels almost like a soft reboot, like a launch for a potential batch of new films. And I appreciate that. I get, you know, not wanting to be as directly connected to past films, but I think they could have done something a lot cooler with connecting it to previous movies. There were like multiple opportunities where I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gonna connect to this from this movie. And I like kind of lit up in the face. I was like, oh, are they gonna do this? And they just ended up going a completely different route, which is totally cool. But I do feel like for this being a Final Destination movie, they did miss out on connecting it to previous entries. Now, maybe that's just me wanting everything to be like Final Destination 5's ending and just blowing my mind. I don't know. That's just an initial thought I had. There's also one reveal in the movie that's extremely obvious. I mean, like early on in the movie, I turned to my girlfriend. We both were like, yeah, right? Yeah. And then later in the movie, we looked at each other. When this revelation happens, you're like, come on, that was the most obvious thing ever, right? So while Bloodlines was a creative sequel, I mean, it's the 6th film in an ongoing horror franchise, you've got a formula that works for you. How much can you really do different and not piss off fans, right? This one switches some things up, but what's crazy about it is I was more engaged with the opening 20 or so minutes, like the whole premonition, than the rest of the movie, weirdly enough. The events in that opening, I would have liked to have spent more time in that moment, if that makes any sense. I don't want to spoil anything, but I was kind of on board for the movie they were setting up. Then it turns into something else completely different, which is cool. It's different again, but it might not have been what I was hoping for. While this entry's fresh, I feel like Final Destination as a whole missed out on an even fresher take with going the route of following the events of the premonition even more so than they did. Again, I'm speaking vaguely here, but if you've seen the movie, you're probably picking up what I'm putting down. I just don't want to spoil it for those who haven't seen it. But look, at the end of the day, Final Destination Bloodlines, solid addition to the franchise. It's not the worst. That bar is extremely low. It's not the best. I think the first will probably forever be the best, but it is maybe in the middle to top tier of the franchise. It's got characters that you feel something for. It's got fresh, unique kills, and it does flip the script a little bit following the opening premonition, keeping us on our toes, but still having those predictable reveals and moments where you're like, okay, we've seen this before. It's about a 3 out of 5 for me, probably. Enjoyed my time. I'm not negative overall, but it didn't knock my socks off, and there are better Final Destination movies out there. But that's just my honest take on Bloodlines. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below and hit that like button. Subscribe to that notification bell and be on the lookout for more videos coming very soon. But until next time, I'll see you guys later.